My son left a voicemail on a Tuesday morning, 43 seconds. I still have it saved on my phone. Dad, Vanessa's family thinks the ceremony should stay intimate. Just close family on her side. We'll set up a live feed so you can watch from home. You'll see everything. It'll be like you're right there. Like I was right there. At my own son's wedding. I'm Lawrence Hewitt. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years building Hewitt Restoration, a company that specializes in historic building preservation, courthouses, churches, old hotels that developers wanted to tear down. I saved them, brick by brick, contract by contract, from a one-man operation out of the pickup truck to a 60-employee firm with projects across 4 states. I also put my son through college, paid off his student loans when he couldn't find work after graduation, fronted the down payment on his condo, co-signed his business loan when he wanted to open his catering company. I have every receipt, every bank transfer, every wire confirmation. Not because I'm bitter, because I'm a contractor. I keep records. What I didn't keep a record of was the slow erosion. After my wife Patricia passed in 2018, it was just the 2 of us. My son Nathan and me. He was 26. I thought grief would pull us closer. For a while, it did. We'd have dinner on Sundays. He'd call me from the road when he was doing deliveries. He asked my advice about his menu, his pricing, his vendors. I was useful. I was Dad. Then he met Vanessa. I want to be clear about something. I had nothing against Vanessa personally. Not at first. She was sharp, well-dressed, spoke the way people speak when they've been told their whole lives that how they speak matters. Her family was Charleston old money, not the working kind of wealth, the inherited kind. Her father, a man named Whitfield, had never held a salaried position in his life. His grandfather had owned textile mills. The family still lived off the proceeds, dressed like they were going to a horse show, and referred to anyone who built something with their hands as tradespeople, as if that was a lesser category of human. The first time I met them at a dinner in Charleston, Vanessa's mother looked at my hands. Just a glance, but I caught it. The kind of look that catalogs a person and files them under a heading you can't appeal. Nathan saw it too. He said nothing. The next 6 months, I started noticing things. Nathan stopped calling on Sundays. When I reached out, his responses were shorter. When I visited, he seemed distracted, half present, like he was rehearsing something. Last Thanksgiving, I drove 4 hours to spend the holiday with him and Vanessa. Her family was there too. Whitfield made a toast that referenced Nathan's catering business as a charming little venture. Nathan laughed along with everyone else. I watched him from across the table and didn't recognize the expression on his face. After dinner, I heard Nathan on the phone in the kitchen. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was getting a glass of water. He's fine, Vanessa. He just doesn't understand how formal events work. Your family has a certain standard. I get that. He'll be fine in the background. The background. I drove home that night and sat in my kitchen for an hour without turning on the lights. The wedding planning made everything explicit. Vanessa's mother handled everything. The venue, the guest list, the catering, ironically not Nathan's company. Her family had a preferred vendor. My role was communicated through Nathan, never directly. I was informed of decisions. My check was expected. $110,000. That was the number Nathan mentioned, carefully over the phone. Just to cover the main expenses, Dad. It would mean a lot to us. I said yes. I transferred the deposit the same week. 3 weeks before the wedding, I asked Nathan about the rehearsal dinner. Specifically, whether I'd be seated with the family or at a peripheral table. He was quiet for a moment. Dad, Vanessa's family is pretty traditional about these things. They do a seated dinner format. You'd be more comfortable at the secondary table with some of our mutual friends. The secondary table, at my son's rehearsal dinner. That I was paying for. I said I understood. I didn't make a scene. I went home and added the number to the spreadsheet I'd been keeping since Nathan's college tuition. The total, including the wedding deposit, was $412,000. That's what I'd given my son since Patricia died. Not a loan. A gift. No paperwork, no interest, no conditions attached. That was my mistake. No conditions. The voicemail came on a Tuesday. 43 seconds. Ceremony was intimate. Live feed. Like I was right there. I listened to it twice. Then I called my site foreman, a man named Al, who has worked for me for 19 years. Al picked up on the second ring. Boss, what do you need? I need you to come have coffee with me this afternoon. Al didn't ask why. He showed up at 3 o'clock, sat down at my kitchen table, and I played him the voicemail. He listened without expression. When it ended, he set his mug down. You paid for the whole thing? Deposits are already in. The venue, the catering contract, the florist. And they're telling you to watch a live stream. That's correct. Al is 61. He's been married to the same woman for 34 years. He has 2 daughters who call him every Sunday without fail. He looked at me the way a man looks at another man when something has gone genuinely wrong, not with pity, with gravity. Lawrence, he said, what do you actually control here? That was the question I needed someone to ask out loud. I spent the next 2 days going through every vendor contract, not because I was planning something specific, because I needed to understand the landscape before I made any decision. That's how I approach every project. You don't touch a wall until you know what's behind it. The venue was the Palmetto House, a restored antebellum estate outside Beaufort, South Carolina. I'd actually done structural work there in 2019, replaced the original heart pine flooring on the second floor, reinforced 3 load-bearing walls, restored the original plasterwork in the main ballroom. The owner, a man named Reginald, had called me personally to thank me when we finished the job, said it was the finest restoration work he'd seen in 20 years. We'd stayed in contact. He'd referred 2 clients to us since then. I was listed as the primary financial guarantor on the venue contract, my company's name and my personal signature on the dotted line. The catering company, a firm called Coastal Table, had done the food for Hewitt Restoration's 25th anniversary event. I'd given them their largest single contract that year. The owner, a woman named Paulette, had sent me a handwritten thank you note afterward. Still had it somewhere. The florist was a man named Greg, who supplied flowers for our office lobby and had done arrangements for Patricia's memorial service. He'd refused to charge me full price for the memorial work, said it was the least he could do. The photographer was a woman named Simone who had photographed 3 of our restoration project unveilings for press purposes. I'd recommended her to 2 architecture firms afterward. I was not just a customer to these people. I was, in the language of my industry, a load-bearing relationship. I called Nathan on a Thursday evening. He answered with the tone people use when they're expecting a difficult conversation. Hey, Dad. I got your voicemail. I was going to call you about that. Vanessa's family really does prefer. Nathan, I'm going to ask you a direct question and I need a direct answer. Am I invited to your wedding ceremony? A pause. Dad, it's more nuanced than that. It's a yes or no question. Vanessa's family has certain expectations about the ceremony format. It's a private exchange of vows, very intimate. Her family will be there. Yes, but... So it's intimate, in the sense that her family is invited, and I'm not. Silence. Nathan, I signed the contracts for this wedding. I've paid the deposits. The venue, the catering, the flowers, all of it runs through my name and my company. And we really appreciate that, Dad. We do. Then help me understand why the man funding the wedding isn't welcome at the wedding. His voice shifted, went slightly harder. Dad, you have to understand the kind of family Vanessa comes from. They have a way of doing things. Whitfield was very clear that having someone at the ceremony who might not understand the formalities. Someone who might not understand the formalities. Dad, I restored a National Register property last year, Nathan. I've attended unveilings at the Governor's Mansion, the Charleston Museum, and 3 cathedral restorations. What formality am I likely to violate? A long pause. Then, Dad, you're a contractor. There it was, clean and simple. You're a contractor. I was quiet for a moment. I built my own company from nothing, I said. I put you through school, paid your loans, bought your first van, co-signed your business license, and in Whitfield's family, that makes me a contractor. I'm not saying I agree with it, but you're going along with it." He didn't answer. "Nathan, I want you to think about what you're asking me. You're asking me to pay for a ceremony I can't attend. Watch it on a screen, from home, while Whitfield's family sits in the venue that my company restored. Dad, please don't make this bigger than it is. I'm not making it anything. I'm describing it accurately. Vanessa would be devastated if this turned into a whole thing. I would be devastated if my father was asked to watch my wedding on a live stream." Silence again. "I need you to think about this seriously," I said. "I'll call you Friday." He said okay. He didn't sound like he believed me. I made coffee and sat with my records. $412,000 since Patricia died. Before that, college tuition, the car I bought him at 17, every hospital copay, every summer camp, every school trip. I didn't keep those records. I never thought I'd need to. I thought about Patricia. She would have been 61 this year. She was a high school art teacher for 22 years. She used to say that the most important thing you could teach a kid wasn't technique or theory. It was consequences, the understanding that what you put into the world comes back to you in some form. She was better at that lesson than I was. I called Reginald at the Palmetto house on Friday morning. "Lawrence, good to hear from you. You excited about the wedding tomorrow week?" "That's actually why I'm calling, Reginald. There's been a development." He listened while I explained the situation, not all of it. The relevant parts. That I was the primary financial guarantor on the contract. That circumstances had changed regarding my attendance at the event. "Lawrence, I have to be honest with you. That's one of the stranger things I've heard in my 30 years doing this. You and me both. As the signatory and guarantor, you do have the right to modify or cancel the contract with proper notice. The penalty clause is 15% of the total." "I know. I wrote the check for the deposit." He paused. "What are you thinking about doing?" "I'm thinking about exercising the options available to me. I wanted to let you know professionally." "Understood. I appreciate the call." I called Paulette at Coastal Table next. Lawrence. Sorry, I always think of you as Finn for some reason. She'd been calling me Finn by mistake for 4 years. I'd never corrected her. It occurred to me in that moment that she didn't even know my first name, and I was about to cancel a contract that represented a significant portion of her spring revenue. "Paulette, I need to talk to you about the Henderson-Hewitt wedding contract." I told her what I'd told Reginald, the relevant facts, the change in circumstances. "Oh, Lawrence." She was quiet for a beat. "That's not right." "No, it isn't." "Are you seriously considering canceling?" "I'm seriously considering what it means that I'd be funding a celebration I'm prohibited from attending." Another pause. "Lawrence, I don't know what to say except that in 20 years of catering, I've never been in a situation where the person paying for the event wasn't welcome at it." "Neither have I said, "and I'm the one paying for it." I called Greg and Simone. The conversations followed the same shape: shock, silence, the careful, uncomfortable recognition that something was fundamentally wrong with the arrangement. I called Nathan at 6 o'clock Friday evening. "Dad, I talked to Vanessa, I talked to her parents. Everyone agrees that the current arrangement is the best solution for everyone. Everyone except me." "Dad." "I want a direct answer, Nathan. Am I or am I not invited to your wedding ceremony?" A pause. Vanessa's voice, faint in the background. Then Nathan. "Dad, you're not invited to the ceremony. You're welcome at the reception dinner. We thought that was a reasonable compromise." A compromise is when both parties give something up. "I gave up my invitation. What did you give up?" Silence. "Nathan, I'm going to give you until Sunday at noon to reconsider this. If the answer is still no, I'll be making some business decisions about the vendor contracts." "Dad, you wouldn't do that." "I've spent 31 years in this industry making hard calls. I don't say things I don't mean. You'd ruin our wedding because your feelings are hurt. That phrase, "Your feelings are hurt," like wanting to attend your son's wedding, was a minor emotional inconvenience rather than a fundamental expectation. "My feelings aren't the issue," I said. "The issue is that you've asked me to fund something I'm not allowed to attend. That's not a family relationship. That's a transaction with a bad contract." He was quiet. "Sunday at noon," I said. "Think about it." I hung up and sat in Patricia's chair in the living room. I don't usually sit in that chair. But it was one of those nights. I thought about what kind of precedent this set. If I accepted this arrangement, what came next? Would I be the grandfather who got a holiday card but wasn't invited to the Christmas morning photos? Would I be the man who funded a house down payment but got a text rather than a call when the baby was born? Would I keep writing checks into an arrangement that had already established I was the contractor, not the family? Patricia would have said something clear about this. She never had much patience for situations where the obvious answer was being avoided for social convenience. Sunday came and went. Nathan didn't call. At 12:15, I called Reginald. "Lawrence, I wondered if I'd hear from you today. I'm canceling the contract for the Henderson-Hewitt wedding, Reginald. As the primary signatory and guarantor, I'll wire the penalty amount this afternoon." A long pause. "I'm sorry it came to this," he said. "So am I." I called Paulette. She picked up on the first ring, like she'd been expecting it. "I'm canceling the catering contract, Paulette. I'll honor the 20% penalty clause in full." "Lawrence, are you sure?" "I'm sure that I'm not paying for a dinner. I'm not allowed to eat at the ceremony of." She didn't have an answer for that. I called Greg. I called Simone. Each call took less than 3 minutes. I was courteous. I paid every penalty without argument. That afternoon, I wired a total of $38,000 in cancellation fees to 4 vendors. It was still 60% less than funding the entire event would have cost. Nathan called at 4 o'clock. "Dad, what did you do? The Palmetto house just called Vanessa's mother, the catering company." "I cancelled the contracts." "You can't do that." "I did it." "You're destroying our wedding because of your ego." "I'm enforcing a basic standard that I should have enforced years ago. You don't get a man's money without his presence. That's not ego, that's a contract." "Vanessa, hysterical." "Then you have a problem to solve. I suggest starting by figuring out how to fund the event yourself." "We don't have $110,000. "Neither do I, not for events I'm excluded from." "Dad." "Nathan, I love you. I will always love you, but I spent 4 years writing checks and watching you choose other people's comfort over your own father's dignity. That ends today." He hung up. Al texted me that evening. "Word travels fast in the vendor community, apparently. Heard what happened. You okay?" I told him I was. I wasn't entirely sure that was true, but I was sure I'd done the right thing. Vanessa's father called me that night, Whitfield. He had the measured, controlled voice of a man who has never had to raise it to get what he wanted. "Mr. Hewitt, I think there's been an unfortunate misunderstanding." "There's been no misunderstanding. My family has certain traditions around the ceremony. We meant no disrespect. You asked my son to exclude his father from his wedding and expected me to pay for it. Call it what you'd like. Perhaps we were hasty. We could revisit the guest arrangements. The contracts are already cancelled." A pause. "Mr. Hewitt, do you understand the position this puts our family in?" "I understand it exactly," I said. "It's the same position you put me in 3 weeks ago. You're welcome to fund the event yourself. I understand your family has resources." A long silence. "Mr. Hewitt, that's—" "Good night, Whitfield." I hung up. The next morning, a Sunday, I drove to the site of a courthouse restoration we'd been working on in Columbia. Not because I needed to. Because I needed to be somewhere that made sense to me. I walked the perimeter, touched the original limestone facade we'd been cleaning and repointing for 6 weeks. Work I understood. Work where the material tells you what it needs and you either listen or the building falls. Nathan called that afternoon. "Dad, Vanessa's family is saying they'll contribute to rebooking the venue. They want to try to salvage something." "That's good. I hope they do." Are you going to help? No. Silence. Nathan, I'll say this once and I won't repeat it. I'm your father. I will be your father until I die. I love you without condition. But financial support requires a basic level of mutual respect. That's not a threat. It's just true. When you're ready to have that conversation, I'm here. He was quiet for a long time. Mom would be so angry at me right now, he said finally. That surprised me. I hadn't expected him to say that. Yes, I said. She would. I kept thinking Vanessa's family just had a different way of doing things, and I kept not saying anything because I didn't want to start a conflict. I know. I didn't think about what I was actually asking you to accept. I know that too. He was quiet again. Then, Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't rush to answer him. I stood in the parking lot of that old courthouse and looked at the original stone we'd spent months restoring, stone that had been there since 1887, and I let the silence sit between us the way you let mortar cure. You can't rush it, it either sets or it doesn't. I know you are, I said. We talked for almost an hour. Not about the wedding, not about Vanessa or Whitfield or money. About Patricia. About what she used to say about consequences, about the Sunday dinners we'd stopped having, about what Nathan actually wanted his life to look like, separate from what the Whitfield family expected it to look like. I don't know how the story ends. Not yet. Nathan and Vanessa are still together. They're planning something smaller, apparently. Whether I'm invited, we haven't formally discussed. What I know is this. For 4 years, I confused generosity with dignity. I thought that if I kept giving, kept being useful, the relationship would correct itself. It didn't. Relationships don't correct themselves. They reflect what you accept. Patricia used to say the most important restoration work wasn't the buildings. It was knowing which walls were worth saving. I think I finally understand what she meant. I keep coming back to the moment I sat in Patricia's chair that night. Not my chair. Hers. The one by the window she used to grade papers in. I don't sit in it often because it still feels like borrowing something that belongs to someone else. But that night I needed to be somewhere that had her in it because I needed to think clearly, and she was always the clearer thinker between the two of us. What I've come to understand is that what happened with Nathan wasn't a single event. It was the result of years of choices, his, mine, both of ours. I chose to keep giving without requiring anything in return. I told myself that was love. Maybe it was, partly. But it was also avoidance. I didn't want conflict. I didn't want Nathan to feel the financial strain I'd felt growing up. So I removed every consequence from his life that I had the power to remove, and in doing that, I accidentally taught him that support was unconditional in the wrong direction, that it didn't require respect, didn't require basic acknowledgement, didn't require him to consider me a full human being rather than a resource. That's the part I had to sit with, the part that was on me. There's a kind of integrity that only shows up under pressure. I've seen it in buildings, and I've seen it in people. A wall can look solid for 20 years and still fail the moment the load changes. What holds isn't the surface, it's the underlying structure. Whether the foundation was built honestly, whether the materials were sound, whether someone did the work correctly when no one was watching. Nathan had never been tested the way the Whitfield family tested him. When the pressure came, he bent toward whoever was applying it. That's not a character flaw so much as a gap in formation, a thing that wasn't built yet. What I did by canceling those contracts wasn't revenge. I want to be honest about that. It was the first time in 4 years that I applied the same standard to my personal life that I'd always applied professionally. In my work, you don't sign a contract you can't honor. You don't take a man's money and then tell him he's not qualified to be on the job site. The moment I heard, "You're a contractor," spoken in that tone, as though 31 years of building things that outlast all of us was a mark against me, something clarified, not in anger, in recognition. The hard thing about holding a line is that it costs something real. $38,000 in penalties. More than that, the particular grief of watching your son have to reckon with a version of himself he probably didn't know existed. I didn't enjoy any of it, but I'd learned from building old structures that sometimes the most important work is removing what doesn't belong so what's worth preserving can stand on its own. Patricia used to tell her students that character isn't what you do when things are easy. It's what you do when the choice costs you something. I think she was right. I think the decision I made that Sunday afternoon cost me something I'm still measuring, and I think it was the right one. Nathan and I are still finding our way back to each other. It's slow work. It should be slow. Some things don't cure fast and still hold.